Yeah, yeah. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, like Christina and Brandon have said, right? These self-directed buyers are typically buyers that have some sort of buyer fatigue, and they don't want to be sold to unless they're ready and already pretty much convinced, right? They know what they want and need, probably before they're ever really engaging with you. And, being a buyer is exhausting. My mind was honestly blown when I got ahead of title, right? My progression was pretty quick, and the amount of emails and thoughtless outreach that buyers are getting today is kind of insane. And buyers are feeling this with the rise of AI and automation and all these spray and pray methods happening. So the shift to a more self-directed buyer journey is why I think we're seeing a rise in PLG offerings, free offerings from companies, and versions of products to cater to these kinds of buyers. So it's been really interesting.
Yeah, I think today it's less about what you sell, and it's more about how you sell it, right? It's creating those great buying experiences. I think everyone here is a little bit afraid to fill out a form because they know that as soon as you fill that out, what's going to happen? The SDRs are going to be coming, right? And I think we've conditioned the market to think that. And also, I do think a lot of times marketers get a bad rap these days, but what people really don't like is the irrelevant messaging. It's the annoying in your face ads. It's the invasive pop-ups. It's the faceless brands. It's the marketing without any creativity. But done right, that builds your brand, that builds the trust. It connects with your buyers. And in that case, they are more willing to talk to you. In fact, they actually do want to talk to you. I think Chili Popper has done a great job of that. I'm only 30 days into the job, so I had nothing to do with it whatsoever. But it is a big reason why I myself even wanted to join the company. They are a brand that I know and I like and I trust them.
No, and that's part of, oh, sorry, I was going to take us in because you guys are already there. What are the strategies to get in front of these buyers before they come to the site? And Brandon, you're already talking about that a little bit of there are things that we're doing right now that if layered properly can still net you that positive of the brand experience and creating that environment that you want to buy. Katie, why don't you kick us off for that question?
Yeah, so like I alluded to, right, I think some of the most important things that you can do to cater to these buyers is lower those barriers for them and allow them to experience your product firsthand, right? So PLG offerings are great for this. And we're seeing more and more companies offering these kinds of experiences, right? If you have a product that doesn't allow for a PLG offering, maybe offer a self-directed demo on your website so that they can click around and experience it that way. But there's also leveraging intent data, like you can with SalesIntel, to build brand awareness and content-aware campaigns, right? When when I got my first big promotion at Sendoso from SDR to Lifecycle Marketing Associate, one of the first things I did was to rewrite all of our messaging to kind of cater to that specific buyer's level of intent. So, for example, lower intent prospects needed more education. How could my product help them? How were others in their space leveraging it? And then for higher intent score prospects, we really narrowed in on differentiation. How are we different? What made us special that they should know about? And the results were kind of crazy, right? Our top line reply rate skyrocketed from 3 to 4% to 18 to 26 because we were providing the right messaging at the right time without being too pushy. And, of course, being from Sendoso, I've also run direct mail campaigns for those high intent buyers. For example, recently put together a field marketer survival kit where high intent field marketing personas got a full experience, right? Where they watched several videos about the struggles that they may be facing and how we could help them. So obviously that helps us stand out from the noise and, helps us to get them engaged and curious to learn more. But also social media is a huge one. And a lot of companies are afraid of social media or don't prioritize it because it's notoriously really hard to track. However, for us, since we've started prioritizing LinkedIn and becoming more active, we're seeing at least 30% of our demo requests come in with a how'd you hear about us related to LinkedIn, and an even higher percentage of PLG signups. So, and our exec and leadership team have started to share more openly on LinkedIn and more often, right? We're not just sharing our wins. We also admit when we fail and what we've learned from it, which is humanizing our brand and establishing emotional connection within the community. And Brandon, I think you'll appreciate this. I do have a fun stat on this. People who are emotionally connected to a brand are way more likely to recommend you. It's actually 71% versus 45%. And then finally, we're also working with influencers. So we have a influencer marketing program, which is a really great way for us to, get exposed to a broader audience and to get more reach. So those are the things that we're doing.
I love that, because I'm thinking back to the last B2B purchase I made. What did I do? I said, hey, we're in the market for intent data. I'm going to go to my trusted peers, and they, bunch of them mention SalesIntel. Well, guess what? Guess who is top of my list right now? I'm going to go check out SalesIntel. Right.
Yep.
And we really have to think, how do we like to buy? Put ourselves in the customer's shoes, have that empathy, know what they're going through. Because again, we can put together our personas, we can put together our sales funnel as much as we want, but that's all hypothetical, right? That's almost like more of a wish list than anything else. Because whoever actually matches your buyer personas that you have on paper, and a lot of times too, it's something that we did 2 years ago and no one has opened that Google Doc since. But it's always like talking to customers. It's challenging our own hypotheses and going out and making sure that the value props and the use cases of our product is still the same, because a lot of times the market evolves, your product evolves, your buyers evolve, and that does change. And when I'm buying something, I really want someone who is that expert, who really is going to help me, right? And I've got another stat for you, because I love the stats, and this one I've been rattling off for a few years. I think it's a few years old at this point, but I think it still is very relevant and illustrates the point. So 92%, and this comes from ITSMA, 92% of executives would pay attention to unsolicited messages, even if it's from a company that they've never done business with, if that message contains ideas that might be relevant to their business. So what they're really saying here, this study goes on to say that the 3 most important factors of an enterprise deal: it's knowledge and understanding of unique business issues, it's knowledge and understanding of their industry, and it's fresh ideas to advance their business. So in other words, the number one reason an enterprise buyer makes a purchasing decision and is willing to talk to those reps is knowledge that is relevant to them. It's not, let me just rattle off these stats that I tell to every single buyer on the call, right? It's okay, here's what this actually means for you and your business. And that does require you knowing a little bit more about them and their business, right? It's doing that deeper research, right? Again, it has to be relevant to their business. I can't tell you how many people find something about me that's not relevant at all. It's not hard to find that I'm a 49er fan, and yes, I'm still hurt for I've not got over the Super Bowl yet. But what does that have to do with my business at all? You know what I mean?
I mean, I think the thing that also hasn't been added here, and I agree so much, is your buyers also don't know how to buy your product. Like, we give our buyers too much credit, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but so often we assume buyers get what your product does. We assume that buyers know how to buy your product. We assume that buyers know how to measure the impact of your product. And just because they have a line item in their budget to fill with a tool like yours doesn't mean that they are educated to the point where that can really be meaningful. And I talk a lot about this idea of the Vitamix effect, which is like a Vitamix is objectively like, it's a blender, but it does so much more than that, right? Like, if you have a Vitamix, like, calm down. I know.
It's the best blender ever. I've had
Listen,
mine
I
years,
know. And this is the point. The point is the education, right? When I was in college, the first big purchase I made was a Vitamix, because everyone's like, you can make hummus. And I was like, I don't like hummus, right? So I bought the Vitamix. I spent like half my paycheck, and it sat on the shelf for 2 years. And I made 2 smoothies, and that's it. Because I wasn't educated and I wasn't bought into it. People told me, I bought the hype, right? It's like you said, I got it. But I was like, I should have just bought like a $29 blender and that ROI would have been so much higher. And so it doesn't mean that a Vitamix is a bad tool. It means I wasn't an educated enough buyer to see ROI. And you can't just assume that your buyers know how to measure and use your product. And so by the time they get to your site, you better hope the information that exists in the world is going to fill in those blanks. And if it doesn't, that's okay. But you start there. You start by filling in those gaps so they can really understand, what are they buying? Is it the right tool for me right now to solve this problem? And if the answer to those things are yes, you won't have churn. If the answer to any of those are no, and you don't address it before they buy, you will have churn. It is almost a black and white formula.
Yeah, totally. And there's some good research out there. I won't quote any more stats, but there's a good book out there, The Jolt Effect. I don't know if anyone's read that one. And a lot of what they're saying in that book is there's buyer indecision worse today than ever before, but it's not for the reasons we think. It's actually less about, I don't trust you. It's more about they don't trust themselves and they don't trust their company's ability to implement your solutions. So we really do have to be those trusted partners, and we have to know about them and their business and how other companies like them have benefited from solutions like ours, right? So, I bet the next blender that Christina goes out and tries to purchase, she's going to wonder herself, do I have the ability to make the smoothies that I want to make? I don't know. Should I buy this blender or not?
We don't
And
know.
I love what you guys are talking about here, because I don't want to recap, because you all went through a lot of things. What are strategies to get in front of these buyers? PLG motions, very strong for that. Either giving them a self-directed path if you can't do PLG, because that is like a big lift for some organizations. Making sure that you are targeting people at the right time with intent, but ultimately making sure that you're doing all of the brand plays right is what I'm hearing. Making sure that you're being human, that you're in social media, that you're reaching to community, that you're really doing all of this stuff to make sure that people know who you are. And again, that's why content is so important. As a content creator myself, I love hearing this as well, because it makes a difference. The self-directed buyer will only know as much as you have told them. So then how do you get all of that to actually happen? Let's talk about implementation. What needs to happen within an organization for you to actually start making progress to capture the self-directed buyer?
I mean, I can kick this one off. The first thing is put everything that you think you know in a blender. And I don't say throw it in the garbage, but I'm just saying, like, mix it up a little bit.
Use
right?
that Vitamix.
Yeah.
Put it in a Vitamix. Make salsa, hummus. I don't know. I actually don't soup. I don't know what you can do with it. See, I shouldn't have bought one. But point being, the ingredients are there, but how we use them are really strange. And I will give you an example. So if you kind of look at the old and dusty, like we're going to be like old and dusty way of actually thinking about how we sell to people, it's these very defined stages in a sales process, right? It's like we're going to qualify, and then we're going to do discovery, and then we're going to do a demo, and then we're going to validate, negotiate, contract sent, contract one. No, it's not how it works. Right. And buyers are familiar with that buying pattern, and they don't want to go through that, especially if you have a highly educated buyer that is coming in to your process and you put them in this very regimented. That's not delightful. That's aggravating. They've likely done a lot of their own discovery. So an example of what you can do differently to Vitamix it up is think about the idea of a demo discovery hybrid. Right? Create something new. Your customer is coming to you, and what do they want at that point in time? They want to see your product to validate the research they've already done. Guess what? Whatever you wanted them to do in that point in time no longer matters. That is what they want. That is what they need. And I know what you're thinking, but I have to do discovery. How do I identify pain? I have to do my levels. I have to get to the point where I can emotionally get them bought in to buy. Put that aside for now. You can do that while you show the product, because if they want to see the product, that means their wallet's like kind of coming out of their pocket a little bit. They're like, maybe I should buy this. I don't know. So great. You want to see the product? I'm going to show you the product throughout. I'm going to ask you questions to make sure I'm showing you what matters to you right now, because we have a very in-depth product. There's a lot of bells and whistles. Not all of them may be relevant for you today. And I want this time we spend together to be the most relevant it can possibly be, because you're in a position where you have to make a very important decision for your business. And I want to help you with that. So let's start by showing you the product. Right now I show, I tell, And then I ask you a question. And that question is your discovery, but I'm showing you the product. I'm not gatekeeping it, right? So there's this idea of how do people want to buy, but how do you also get what you need to be a responsible seller and make sure that you are qualifying? These things do not have to happen in regimented set steps. They can happen really organically in a way that actually delights the buyer and shakes it up a little bit. Because I guarantee 90% of people are following their process, their checkbox, and their buyer hates it. And the person who does this right is going to get your business because you didn't do it.
Right. And I think we really have to look at, again, not your funnel, not what you put down, but it's how buyers actually buy. It's the journey that they go through. And the only way that we really understand that is going and talking to buyers. It's as marketers and product marketers listening to those calls, talking with customers, talking with people who didn't buy. As I'll tell you, again, I just passed my 30-day mark. And one of the things that I really did at Chili Piper is go out and talk to people. And I got so much insight into people who, from people who didn't buy. And these are closer friends that told me they didn't buy. And it gave me so much more insight actually than talking to actual customers. So I really want to know, what are those things that actually cause you not to buy? And is that like no judgment here and no judgment passed on to the team? I'm really using this to help improve our process and educate the team. And then, yeah, it kind of goes back to some of the things that you're saying. If I request a demo, I want to see a demo on that first call. If there's a pricing page on your website, there better be some pricing on that page, not talk to a rep first, who's then going to qualify you, then going to hand you an off to an AE, who's then going to book another call to then demo later, and then maybe give you the price, right? That's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, we no longer live in a world where we can have pricing pages without pricing, and we can't get away with screening emails that have 4+ qualifying questions before your buyer gets a demo, right? So in today's environment, like Christina said, totally agree with her. We're going to see that inbound teams are sending qualified people directly in for demos. My advice is definitely to lower the walls there. And then for outbound, I think we're going to see all of the successful teams really leaning into a more strategic approach, like Brandon said, right? We're going to get rid of the outdated spray and pray methods and lean into that personalization and the relevance, right? Relevance is so important, like Brandon said. And I think outbound teams are also going to start using all these channels like LinkedIn to really build relationships up front and provide value up front so that when that buyer is ready, you're the first to come to mind. Totally agree with you guys.
Very good. And some other things that I think about a lot too is, especially after I read that book, The Jolt Effect, and how we can really enable our champions to sell effectively internally, and well, not sell it internally necessarily, but it's have that confidence in themselves and their team, are things like, let's prepare an internal selling presentation in partnership with that, like with my champion, and then he has that confidence to then go pitch his company, put an RFP together that he can go and take his legal team or whatever, his internal team, offer safety nets like cancellation windows or money back guarantees, or providing any sort of downside risk protection, any sort of project plans, that sort of thing, to really, again, make that buyer confident in themselves. And then it does put a little bit more pressure on your implementation and success teams, which I am all about.
So then we've heard a lot about the inbound processes and getting this through. And Katie, I want to just double tap on that outbound component, because we're all what we've been saying and what we've been hearing is get the buyer to the product, get the buyer to let them see what they want. So what does that mean for BDRs long term? Do you anticipate them being just kind of absorbed into sales teams? Will they be used for specific activities on existing accounts? Where do you see the future of that role going if the whole point is get the buyer to the product faster?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see more of a kind of marketing BDR hybrid. I think BDRs need to have more of a voice and need to be more present on the platforms that their buyers are on, right? So in those communities, right, that Brandon mentioned earlier, like I want all of my BDRs to go be in those communities, talking, building relationships with these buyers that are showing intent, right? In a natural way that doesn't feel forced. So I think we'll see kind of the rise of BDRs and SDRs and whatever you want to call them, XDRs, kind of focusing more on relationship building and being in those places. I think that's a trend that we'll see, but I'm curious to hear what Christina and Brandon think.
I am not one of those that thinks that there's like the BDRs are going to be absorbed or moved. Like I do think that at the very, very top of the funnel, your BDRs can serve as almost little marketers and brand evangelists, right? Like oftentimes that email that you get from a BDR could be the first time that customer is interacting with your brand at all. And we assume that because BDRs are sending so many emails that don't get opened or clicked through, that they're wasted. But I can tell you personally as a buyer, there are so many emails that I get from BDRs, and that's the first time that I'm introduced to that brand. And so it's less about stop doing that. And it's more so, how do we track that behavior to tie it back to what's actually getting them in the door? Because I will see an email from a BDR, I'll learn about a brand, they'll say something somewhat engaging. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, right? And I mark the email as unread, and I make a quick note to like look up this company, and then life hits and it's madness because that's what we're all dealing with all the time. And then 3 days later, I see my note. I was like, oh, yeah, I wanted to look up that company, right? So look up the company and I check it out. And okay, I'm clicking on this and I'm going here. Okay, that's great. And I come back to it, right? A couple weeks later, somebody else reaches out to me and I go, oh, actually, you know what? I was just looking up this organization, right? I was open to that because that BDR that unfortunately never got a reply from me and probably feels like they didn't do a great job. I engaged with you because that BDR reached out to me and put you in front of me. So it's not so much what is the activity that's the problem. It's the tracking, dare I say it, and I don't want to make all the marketers sweat, but like attribution, like, ooh, what actually, I know, I'm sorry. But like, I'm a big fan of like multi-touch attribution. It's all one, whoever touches the customer, great, somebody do it, right? Like if that's happening, that's amazing. But that's the thing. So there is a benefit to having a human being interacting at the top of the funnel with your people. And it's the hardest role to measure and go to market because of what I just said, because you assume no reply to that email means it didn't work. Oh my gosh. 9 times out of 10, if you look at the number of emails sent by a good BDR combined with even the ARR a year later, you should be able to see the impact of those emails, even if it's not a response from that individual. But so many companies don't know how to measure their own sales funnel.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And you said sometimes SDRs are the first, I think most of the time they're the first contact, right? So I think SDRs are more important now than ever before, but I think it's really kind of a shift in their mindset that they need to take, right? And a lot of it too, I think it does lie on management, because management is all about how do we get more activities? How do we squeeze more out of these SDRs and BDRs who are working really hard, and they're often junior people who have to try to understand and have conversations with mid-level and high-level executives. And that's really hard to do. So if the managers themselves aren't educating and enabling and training their people and not getting results, they should be looking in the mirror, right? And a lot of times what you see too is, a study comes out and it says, it takes 17 touches to get in touch with a buyer from an SDR. So what does the SDR do? I got 10 in my cadence right now. I need to just figure out how to add 7 more. And they fill it with fluff. They fill it with something that is completely irrelevant. They don't know what to say. So it's just, hey, following up here, which adds 0 context, which then you know what happens? That number goes up. And then next year, the number goes up again. And it's just this never-ending cycle. Whereas I'm more interested in asking the question, what's not what's the average? How can I get this down? How can I use fewer messages to reach the right people?
That's the key. That's the key. And I think for us, at least what we've seen, our sequence has 7 steps, right? And it generates that high response rate. So I think it's just all about leveraging intent data, really, and different signals to really provide that relevant messaging. Such a good point.
No, I love that, because even if your cadence is only 7 or 10 touches, but they're effective, great. If you have a 3-touch cadence that's really effective, who are you and can you share with the rest of us? Like
Exactly.
that would be wonderful. But yeah, it's I love what you all have been saying. It's pulling all of your brand activity and the tracking. Thank you, Christina, for bringing that up as well, because maybe that's why we're now all kind of in this position of Well, the self-directed buyer, we've got people that have been coming to the site for a while, but now it's just happening in such a mass of people that Gartner's doing studies on it. We're trying to understand the buying behavior, but at the end of the day, it comes down to, are you being authentic in your brand? Are you being present in the places that people want you to be? And are you just having a real conversation? Yep. So then what of, and I'm going to go ahead and ask this question, and then everyone that's here, please, we have these wonderful people here with us, start asking questions. We've already had a couple of come in. We'll go to those next, but I have to ask this because for all of the people that are in these leadership positions and that love their funnels and that like their buyers' journeys, what is the response to people that are saying, but no, I need to understand all of this stuff to track it? How can I still do what you're saying, but then keep part of what I'm doing?
I mean, if you are somebody that is clinging onto your process, and I get it, we're all little spider monkeys to what we've been taught, right? Is it working? Like, if your process is working, I have great news for you. Don't change it. Like, if it's working and you know how to measure it, don't change it. If it's not, you have to ask yourself what's more uncomfortable: continuing to run a marathon with a rock in your shoe, or pulling over, dumping out the rock, and then being able to move faster than you would have had you not made the change. And so it just comes down to that. There's probably elements of what you're doing that really work, and there's elements of what you're doing that are comfortable. And sometimes we choose comfort over result. And I get it, because we are human beings. So at some point, there's a moment where you sit back and you reflect on what's really working. And is it really working because it's comfortable, or because the metrics tell me that it's working? And that's a big one. And if it's not, you don't have to change big things all at once. Make tiny changes a little bit of a time to get you where you need to be. And do not make a change into doing something that you cannot track and cannot measure, because that is also moving backwards. So make deliberate changes. 2 steps forward and 1 step back will still get you where you have to go. And so it's okay not to revolutionize and change everything all at once. Like, baby steps will get us there.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, look, reality is I've worked with a lot of marketers that, like, we love our processes, we love our strategy, but the reality is things change and we have to adapt. There was a Ben Horowitz quote that when I heard it, it really struck me, and it was so true. And he said, "It's better to be right than consistent." Because a lot of marketers, we love to be consistent. We love to put our strategy decks together and we love to just stick to that. And a lot of times, you know, in markets like these, things change and we do have to adapt. So I always encourage my team to, yes, put those strategies together, but realize that we might have to make some adjustments based off of things that we're seeing in the market. Let's read the market. Let's understand the market. Again, let's talk to customers, talk to buyers, talk to non-buyers, and then we can really understand the landscape just a little bit better. And then whenever I'm putting any strategy together, I like, 1, contingency plans, but 2, I'm a really big fan of testing things small, as quick as possible, at low risk as possible, and then trying to scale from there. And you're putting your success metrics together and your failure metrics, because if something's not working, there's a million different things you can try and test. And you could be testing all day, every day, and still not be getting anywhere. But if you say, hey, if we don't hit these metrics, we got to drop it. We got to move on to the next one. And the important thing about that whole process is have a hypothesis. Understand what you are trying to test and why you are trying to test that. And then you can put together more intelligent tests and, again, learn quicker. I think marketing really is a lot about how quickly can we learn.
Yeah, I think mic drops from these two. You know, the only thing I'll add is that, you know, and kind of just reiterate on this. Yes, change is hard. It takes work. But if you're more concerned about that than making things as easy as possible for your buyers, I mean, good luck, right? At the end of the day, like, that's what we need to do to adapt, like Brandon said. So completely agree.
Yep. You heard it here. There's processes that are great. There are things that we can take with us, but you can't take it all. And Apparently we all need a Vitamix. I don't even know what that is, Christina. I'll be completely honest. I remember the bullet blender. That was the one that I had seen a lot of. But we just got to put it on a blender. Yep, I imagine
Slap
it.
chop, right? No, different thing.
Hey, but mine still works, so it's still kicking.
Ladies.
Awesome. All right, so we do have some time for some questions, and we have a lot from you all. Thank you. Please keep them coming. We're going to go ahead and get kickstarted with this one, which is buyers these days are not very comfortable coming on the first level call. Any suggestions around that?
Do what your customer's comfortable with. Like that to me is the very example of they need to fit our process. If you have a customer that is talking to you that is feeling bearish about coming on a call with you, like calls are this is aggressive. Like it is aggressive to be on a call with somebody because you don't have the time to really sit and think and look at your notes. It feels like on a first call, if you don't have trust, like the salesperson has this advantage and everyone's so worried about being taken advantage of, right? Salespeople have this bad rap. And so ask your customers how they like to comfortably buy at this stage and what you can do to help them be educated on not only your product, but the problem they need to solve so that you can be prescriptive. And sometimes simply giving the option for no can turn it into a yes. Sometimes telling them we don't have to hop on a call. Like if that's not a comfortable way for you to buy initially, let's make this really comfortable. And sometimes they go, no, you know what? I do have a lot of questions. Let's hop on a call. So that's the very example. Ask your buyers how they like to buy. You'll learn.
Yep.
Yeah, nothing
Okay.
that.
Okay, she nailed the head on that one. All right, let's keep this going. All right, looks like this one is for you, Brandon. What's the name of that book again?
Oh, the Jolt effect, Jolt, all in caps. I probably don't need to capitalize it if you're going to Google, but by Matthew Dixon and Ted McKenna.
Awesome. I'll make sure to put a link to that book in the recap for everybody, so that way they know exactly where to go to find it. All right, and then here's another one, probably for you, Katie. What type of intent mechanisms are people leveraging successfully? Platforms like G2 and Capteria, or more holistic tools like 6th Sense and similar?
Yeah. So, I mean, right now you're on a SalesIntel webinar, right? SalesIntel is a great tool to leverage and to look at. There's a ton of tools out there. We are using a more, holistic tool like SalesIntel. But I think the biggest things that we really look at is intent scores, both on an individual level and a company level whenever we're looking at intent data. And I think that that's important because a lot of people just look at company level intent, and that is where their deep dive into these scores lays. But we also look at the individual, right? There might be a CMO at a company who is incredibly interested in what we're doing, whereas the VP has no idea we even exist, right? So that messaging needs to be incredibly differentiated, and tools like this can help you do that.
Yeah, and I would also say, like, educate your team on what intent data actually means so that they can have more intelligent and effective outreach. And intent data can be pretty complex things. There's ways you can set it up in different keyword groupings, different levels of intent, different product groupings with your keywords, et cetera, et cetera. And the more you can segment that, the more specific you can be. And then again, presenting it to your reps in places like Salesforce, where they are living every day and they know what it is, they know where to find it, they know what to do with that information so that they can have more effective and relevant outreach.
Yeah, I love that point about keywords. And I think that this is really important because a lot of times admins will put these very generalized keywords in to their intent data tools. And that brings you anyone that's looking up the word sales, right? That's not going to actually bring you buyers that are interested in your product. So it's really important for leaders to like really nail in and kind of focus in on what are your actual keywords versus what's going to bring you the most people showing intent but not really meaning it. So it's really important to find that balance.
Yes, okay. And because I can't help myself, I have to completely jump onto what you guys have said. Yes, different levels of intent, but then with the intent topics, Katie, that is so important because just like intent is a tool, just like branding social is a tool, you have to use it correctly. Getting the right keywords is so important. Having a source that's accurate, so important. And also with intent data, more is better because you get more signals. It gives a better picture, and different signals mean different things that you can operationalize into your sales processes. As you're putting it all in a blender and mixing it up, why not consider that one as well, and really get it going. Awesome. Okay, so then we have a few more questions in here as well. What will be the strategy to sell, for example, a press bending machine? Different to sell software or products that will be used for a persona, such as a blender. We're really talking about the blenders today. Alejandro, I don't think I quite got this, but maybe one of our panelists did. Maybe it's, how does this apply to things that aren't necessarily SaaS specific?
I think maybe like the B2C experience versus like B2B is kind of what I'm getting from that question. And if that is the question, I think B2C and B2B concepts are pretty similar and can apply to both, just in a different way, right? Like B2C, most companies just have, hey, click this item here, purchase this item, right? But if you need a more like kind of hand-holding journey, just make sure that you're providing the information right up front, kind of like Christina was talking about with that blender. Like maybe if she had been surfaced, some recipes after her purchase or whatever, it would have made that ROI stand out to her. So I think education is really important always, whether it's B2C or B2B.
Yeah. I think also that one of the key differences, just from a qualitative standpoint, between a B2B and a B2C sale is, in B2B, your buyer is not spending their money. Right. Like they're not spending the money that's in their personal checking account. And while they bear a lot of responsibility in making sure that they are being responsible with their budget, there is an emotional difference between a buyer that is spending company funds and the responsibility that comes with that, versus a B2C where I'm writing you a check out of my account, where my mortgage or my rent or the food that I'm feeding my family with comes out of that same place. And so I would say, especially in a B2C environment, with that emotional lever there, the care up front is so much more important. People assume bad seller intent because of how they've been sold to as a B2C buyer, and they carry that with them to B2C. If you've ever felt the pressure to spend your hard-earned money on something that you don't want or don't understand, it sort of spoils your view of all salespeople. And then you go to work at an organization and you are interacting now as a B2B buyer, but with a seller, and you carry that personal experience with you, and it's what erodes the distrust. So I would say trust is built in B2C land, and carried over into B2B big time.
Awesome. All right, we'll keep it going. We have a lot of questions about also the outbound function here. Ronit wants to know, where does the cold phone call come in here?
When I think of cold outbound, I think of more your enterprise sales deals. Probably your bigger ticket items. You have a target account list of people who look similar to people who have bought from you in the past, and to me that kind of screams ABM. But whether it is ABM or not, you likely have an outbound sales function, and I don't really think much is different than what we've been talking about. It's about showing up with relevant information. It's about building the trust. It's about setting those expectations and building that relationship with your buyer still. And I think that goes across every interaction with your company, every single touch point with your company, whether that's marketing, sales, support, onboarding, whatever. It leaves an impression, and that gets you closer to, or that builds trust over time, or that can slowly erode trust over time as well. So I think you have to look at the entire experience, not just the outbound function, but I know there's a lot more pressure on that outbound function than ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. And then our last question of the day, how can I get more buy-in on my brand plays? Feels like so much is in the dark funnel and I'm struggling to show direct ROI.
Oof, I feel this one personally. So I'm gonna talk on this one. I think we've all probably dealt with this because, admittedly it's hard, right? We here at Sendoso recently added a "How'd you hear about us" portion to our demo request form. And that's been incredibly helpful in justifying efforts on channels like LinkedIn to executive leadership that maybe are more focused traditionally on immediate revenue plays. And we're also doing things like big brand plays on LinkedIn with, partners, right? And so partnering with them, getting a bunch of exposure. And right after we do plays like that, we are looking at the demo requests that come in, the PLGs that come in, how they hear about us, tracking that and communicating that to executive leadership and saying, hey, we did this brand play. And as a result, our follower count increased X%, and now we're getting that extra exposure because of that for our release of said product today, right? And here's how much that, our engagement has gone up, right? And so it's difficult, but I think meeting with executive leadership and saying, hey, here's why this is important to today's buyer. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to get more strategic and what the playbooks that we're going to offer that are going to spark, curiosity. I mean, it's a journey, but I think ultimately you need to figure out a way to get that executive buy-in so that it trickles down throughout the company.
Yeah, and I love the self-reported attribution. I'm also a big fan of setting up libraries in your call recording, whether it's Gong or Chorus or whatever you're using, and you can set up playlists and flags for certain keywords. We've got a podcast, and a lot of people hear about Chili Pepper through the Awesome Podcast. So put that together, share that with your executive team. But I also do think marketers really do need to do a better job connecting their brand plays to what they do a little bit better. I've been at a few companies where they have great brands, but then people are like, I don't know what you guys actually do. I've seen you on LinkedIn. You're cool. I like you, but I don't know what you're doing. And it's usually like, all they do is these cool things like the list of the top 50 salespeople that you need to know. That doesn't help an SDR have an intelligent conversation with a buyer. Let's connect that a little bit more. And I do think there are ways to disguise your demand gen plays as brand plays or connect those plays a little bit better. So you're doing both at the same time. I don't necessarily think it's one or the other always, but I think we just need to be a little bit more intelligent and thoughtful of what our brand plays are.
No, it's a very important point because that's where, again, it comes back to data. You have the accurate data to go do your go-to-market, but then are you actually able to report on all the investments that you made and making it work? And that's where I love, Katie, where you were saying of look at all the different impacts, or you might have heard that as view through value of what it is that you're doing. Are you getting increased engagement in the content that you're creating? So this is just all really good stuff.
Yeah,
And
and
again,
if what one more thing I'll add too, because I've been in plenty of executive meetings where I'm pitching brand plays, and whenever I'm pitching a brand play, I always make sure it directly connects with one of our top 3 business initiatives, right? And a lot of times it's hard to connect those, but I need to be able to back up why I'm doing these plays. And I do that by showing them, I'm going to walk them through how this actually leads to more success in one of our initiatives. They don't always buy it, and that's fine. And maybe sometimes, it's okay, that failed. Maybe we'll cut that for this quarter. We'll try again next quarter. But then have those hypotheses. Okay, here's the hypothesis of what's going to happen with this brand plan. Here's how we're going to measure success with that.
Don't know, Katie was clapping in the background. She's like, yes, please, we have to do all of this. Yep, Christina's snapping.
I literally took a note as he was talking to add keywords in Gong. So Brandon, thank you.
I love it. I love it. Well, Katie, Christina, Brandon, thank you all so much for your time and for sharing your expertise with all of us here. It's been really amazing having you for the day and just to get to pick your brain a little bit more. I also wanted to share with everyone before we sign off that SalesIntel is having a special offer right now where you can actually try SalesIntel now and you can buy it later. So if you'd like to learn more about that, then definitely let us know. You can either put a 1 in the chat right now, and I'll make sure that you get followed up with. We'll get you as quickly to the process as we can, or you can just follow up into the recap email that you get later today. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful afternoon. And again, thank you to our amazing panelists.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks.